The note form page is already in place, but the actual form for the user to fill in is missing. Let's start by creating the fields for inputting a note body and selecting its color. Hello, welcome to ResoCode, where you're getting prepared for real app development so that you will get freelance clients or a job and be confident about the apps you build. So subscribe and hit the bell to join us on our quest for becoming in-demand Flutter developers. So here we are in the already finished app, and as you can see, the note form page for creating a note should indeed have a field for the note body to be filled in. Hello there, which is of course a multiple line text form field, because there can indeed be multiple lines in a note body. And then of course we have to be able to select a note color, just like this. Then later on in future parts, we are going to implement the to-do list, which is of course reorderable like this. So hello with one L, we can reorder it. It goes up if the keyboard just doesn't show up randomly, but as you can see, it just can be reordered just like this, which is nice, but that will come later. For now, let's focus on the actual note body field and the color selector. So if I go to the app which we are currently building, this is the current state of the note form page. As you can see, we don't have any actual body of the scaffold, we just have its add bar, and that's it. So let's now implement the body so that we can add a form with a body field to it. So as usual, scaffold needs to have a body which will be a form, and this form will have a child. And as is usually the case with forms in Flutter, whenever you want to have multiple fields, which you probably do want to have them, but you also want them to be scrollable, you should not use a list view for the form fields to be held in, but instead you should use a single child scroll view joined with a column. Why is that? Well, list views, they have their optimizations so that the widgets which are not shown on the screen are not really rendered, and this just creates problems, especially when you are trying to test your apps. But overall, you should just not use list views with form fields. Instead, just use a single child scroll view, which will not have any sort of optimizations so that the invisible widgets are not rendered. And this will spare you of all the problems that go together with it when it comes to forms. You may think that we are now being wasteful because we are rendering even widgets which are not going to be visible. But I mean, forms usually don't have an unlimited amount of widgets. They really have widgets which can fit into maybe one screen or two screens at the very maximum. So, I mean, you're not going to have that much of a performance penalty if you render all of the widgets all the time. So the child of this single child scroll view should be a column like this, and this column will have children. And this is where we are going to put the body field and the color field and the to-do list creator and all of that. But actually, just as was the case in the sign-in form, even in this note form page, we do want to auto-validate the form. That means show error messages based on the state which is outputted from our block. This note form state, it just has this Boolean show error messages. I'm not going to go into the details of how it's implemented. If you have forgotten how, you can check out the previous part where we were actually implementing this block. But basically, when this Boolean is true, then we want to auto-validate the form, which means that error messages are going to be shown always and basically on every single change which occurs in one of the form fields. They are all going to be validated, and the user will see messages always of whether or not there is some sort of an error going on. So therefore, we do need to get a hold of the block's state and rebuild this form whenever the value of show error messages in the NoteForm state changes. So of course we can do that with a block builder. So let's wrap this with a block builder. It's going to be NoteForm block and NoteForm state. And we can now say auto validate and set its value to be from state show error messages. But of course, we do not want to rebuild the form on every single state change, because that would include state changes like updating the note body field or changing the is saving from true to false. So therefore, to limit when we rebuild this whole form, which would be kind of wasteful, we need to say build when and provide the previous state, current state, and we want to rebuild this only when the previous state's show error messages does not equal to the current state's show error messages. Now we're cool. This form will not be wastefully rebuilt. So now that we have that, let's go ahead and create a body field widget in a brand new file so that we just don't clutter this file up completely. So let's do just that. Under the NoteForm subfeature in the presentation folder, we're going to create a new folder called widgets. And over there, let's just create a new file called body field widget.dart. Let's just quickly create a stateless widget body field. Let's import material and let's immediately just hop into the NoteFormPage and add this field to be the first child of the single child scroll views column. So we're going to say body field. All right, actually we can make it constant and put a constant constructor over here. So const body field. Right, so that we can optimize the app just a little bit. Actually, in order to be nice Flutter developers, we should probably provide a key here so that possible other users of our app will be able to pass a key into this body field and then subsequently into the super constructor. You should always have something like this, because then, especially if you're building a library, you can drive people crazy if you don't have keys on your widgets. So now that this is sorted out, let's think about how this field will look like. Well, it's going to be a very, very simple text field, right? So let's just say text form field. And we can immediately see it appearing over here. It looks kind of horrible. It's stretched all the way across the page. So that's why we are going to wrap it inside a padding. So let's wrap with padding, and we're going to actually say 10 logical pixels. And now it looks something like this, which makes it look much better than before when it's sort of offset from the edges. Let's immediately handle the visual stuff, which we can immediately see. So we're going to handle the decoration, input decoration. And in addition to the decoration provided by the theme, as you can see, we, for example, have the outline instead of the default underline for the form field. We are also going to say that the label text will be note, again, hard-coded for the purposes of saving time in this tutorial series. And that's it for now. So as you can see, we have a label, which is animated upwards, which is nice. And then there are certain things which the note body should adhere to, which are defined inside of the value object, of course. So if we go into the domain, then notes, then this value objects file, we can see that we have a note body, and over there is the static constant max length. It is set to 1000. Now, of course, if the note body, if the string which we pass into this value object is going to be longer than 1000 characters, we're going to return a failure, and you know what happens then. This note body value object will be invalid. However, we should really try to prevent the user from inputting more than 1000 characters in the first place. So instead of just showing failures all the time, it would be nice to limit the amount of characters which can be actually inputted into the text form field. And indeed, we can do that. We can limit the character count on the field by saying max length, and then we can just get the constant from the note body value object. So let's say max length, just like that. And now, as you can see, hopefully on YouTube as well, that we have 1000 characters limit. We cannot input more than 1000 characters. And also when we type in new characters, they are being sort of added, or the counter increases below. And also you can see that we don't have any return key on the keyboard to create a new line in this text form field. That's because we need to actually explicitly tell this field that it should accept multiple lines. So let's do that right now. We're going to say that max lines is going to be null, which will make it infinite basically, so we can have multiple lines in here, which is nice to see. If we go away and go back, now you can see that we have the return key here. We can create new lines, which is nice. And also to sort of provide this note field to be a bit bigger, even initially a bit taller when it comes to the visuals of the app, we can say that min lines is going to be 5. And what this is going to do is that this note field, this note body field, will appear to be taller right from the get-go. And now, what should we do next? Well, of course, we need to handle the onChanged callback, which gives us a value. And over here, we do not want to do any kind of a logic inside the widget, inside the presentation layer, but instead, we should perform all of the logic inside the application layer. And for that, we already have our NoteForm block. So all we want to do here is to get the block using block provider, or we can also use context.block, let's say NoteForm block. Let's import NoteForm block, and then we're just going to say add, and the event name is NoteForm event dot body changed, and the new value of the body is of course value. And this will trigger all of the different changes of the states which we have just implemented in the previous parts of this series. And lastly, we need to implement the validate method or validator method on this field, which is going to pass us a string for us to use, which is the current string, input it into the body field, but we can actually discard this string because we're not going to use it, because we actually do already have the validation values all done inside the NoteForm state, right? That's because the note entity itself holds all of the validated value objects, including the note body. And just like the validated value object sounds, it means that there is the validation already going on. So if we are over the maximum length, for example, we're going to be able to get the failure, the proper value failure from this value object. So we do not need to perform any additional validation inside of the presentation layer with this kind of a domain-driven design approach we are doing in this series. We have actually already done this kind of a thing when it came to the sign in form. So this should not be a new thing to you, what we are implementing right over here. And again, just like in that sign in form, we're going to do things a bit differently when it comes to the validator over here. That's because, as you are used to, we usually get the state of a block by relying on a block builder, right? Block builder will provide us with the state of a block whenever it changes. We cannot do it right here. That's because the block builder takes some additional time to propagate the state, the newly updated state, to the UI, and that just creates problems, let's say. If you want to have more information, just check out the part where we implemented the sign in form, because over there we are doing the same thing and I explained why we need to do what we are about to do in more detail. But basically, we just cannot get, again, the state using a block builder, which we currently don't even have here, but we need to access the state directly on the block instance, which we are going to get using the extension or the block provider. So again, just call context block, get the node form block, and we need to access the state directly on this instance gotten from the block provider, like this. This will ensure that we always have the most fresh state available in the validator, and that the validator will do actually its job properly, because otherwise we would have an old state over here, and you would basically be able to type in one character more, or practically you would have always the possibility of having a failure, but not notifying the user about the failure in the UI. That's just how it goes. And now on this state, we want to access the node like this. And on this node, we want to access, of course, the body, because this is the field for the body, and then its value. And now we can fold the value. If there is a value on the left, which is F for failure, we want to say f dot maybe map. If there is something unexpected, we are just going to return null. Let's just format this a bit so that we can see what we are doing. I know this formatting is crazy. Like this. And of course, in the case that the value is correct, we want to return null, because hopefully, as you know by now, if validator returns null, it means that nothing, no error message is displayed to the user around or below the text field. But in the case there is an empty value failure, which indicates that the field is of course empty, then we want to say cannot be empty below the text field. And in the case the field exceeds its length, we're going to say exceeding length. And also we want to specify the max allowed length, which we are going to do by saying f, which is the failure. And since this is an exceeding length failure case, this carries together with it the max allowed value, which is nice. From the visual point of view though, one thing still bugs me, and that is the counter and the maximum allowed length of the node body. I mean, it's nice to see it over here, but what if we actually want to hide it in order to make it look like it is in the finished app, right? So in order to hide this counter, we can say that the counter text in the input decoration will be empty string, like this. And now, as you can see, the counter text went away. And we can actually make this node decoration a constant because we are not using any translations, so all of the strings are constants, right? Cool, so actually, now we can even try to save the node to Firestore. And I'm actually quite surprised that it worked, because I think it shouldn't have worked, because we technically still have... Oh, no, it should work, right? Nice, because the to-dos can be empty, right? When we go to the node, the to-dos, the list 3, it just says that there cannot be more than 3 to-dos. And when there are no to-dos, it means that this value object is valid. Then the node color, we have a default color already always selected. As you can see here, it's always set to be the white color unless the user specifies otherwise. And the only thing which was previously causing us errors was that the node body was empty, which is an invalid value by default. But now that the node body is actually filled in, what happens is that the whole node is actually valid. So that's why we can see it over here, that it was added to Firestore, which is awesome. And also, when we don't input anything into the node body, we should see an error message. For sure, it says cannot be empty. We add some text over here, and as you can see, it's added right to Firestore. So this is amazing. However, there is a single small problem which we can fix pretty easily. And that is that while we can create new nodes easily, editing nodes, there's just something wrong with that. If we click on this newly created node, you can see that there is no text present inside of the node, right? But for example, here it should say become an in-demand Flutter developer. But it doesn't say anything. We cannot see any text inside of the node body field. So why is that? Well, of course, if we go into the widget which we have just implemented, nowhere in here are we trying to get the value of the body from the edited node and put it into the text form field. Basically, this text form field will always be blank when the page appears. So what we need to do is to get hold of the edited node and put its body value to be the pre-filled value of the text form field. In order to set a text of a text form field, we need to use a text editing controller and set it as the controller parameter of the text form fields constructor. Now, there are multiple ways we can manipulate and manage this text editing controller. We could, for example, use a stateful widget and implement dispose and init state, but that is just pain in the rear side of your body. So that's why we are instead going to use Flutter hooks, which we have added a while ago into PubSpec YAML. It is a very cool package which allows us to use a hook widget and getting hold and also properly disposing and doing all that kind of lifecycle stuff with text editing controller is as simple as calling use text editing controller like this. We're going to put it into a final text editing controller. Notice that we are still in the build method. Everything happens inside the build method with Flutter hooks. And now we can just set this text editing controller to be the controller for our text form field. If you want to learn more about Flutter hooks more in depth, you can check out the tutorial from the card in the corner, by the way. And now, in order to get the edited note's body value into this text form field, we're going to wrap everything inside a block listener for the NoteForm blog and NoteForm state. And inside of this listener, we're just going to set the text editing controller's text to be equal to the text coming from state dot note dot body. And now this is a validated value object, so we need to say get or crash in order to just get the raw string. And now you may be thinking, but hey, isn't this going to cause issues when we, for example, try to create a new note, right? Because then the body is implicitly invalid because we have an empty note in there. An empty note has an empty note body, which is invalid state for the note body. It should be throwing us the failure, or actually crashing the app, right? Because we have said, where is it? We have said get or crash. And when the body is invalid, as it is with an empty note, the app should crash. We should get some sort of an error, an exception, right? Well, that's not the case, or should I say it's not going to be a case, rather, because we're going to add a magic line over here, and that is listen when, and we want to limit when this listener is being run to previous state, current state, when the previous states is editing is not equal to the current states is editing. And if we take a look at the NoteForm block, whenever we initialize the NoteForm block and we are creating a new note right over here, when the initial note option is none, when there is no initial note, in other words, we emit the state unchanged. So we basically don't emit anything because of how block is implemented, which means that judging by the default NoteForm state, this means is editing is false, and it just doesn't change. So this listener, where we are trying to get or crash the node body, will not run. So we will not crash, even though the node body is indeed by default invalid. However, this is editing will be switched to true right here whenever there is an initial note being passed into the block with this event when we initialize it. But when it's actually switched to being true, this is editing flag. This means that the initial note should already have some data in it. It should have a body which is not invalid. So that's why we're now going to crash the app right here. So let's try right now. If we now try to edit this, become an in-demand Flutter developer node, nothing works, which is interesting to say the least. So I have just found the cause, or possibly found the cause, for why this thing of setting the text editing controller's text to be the one from the edited node's body just did not work. I did not notice it immediately, but as you can see down here, we have 5 errors going on inside this body field widget. So that's why the app just did not even load this new code, because as you know, when you have errors in your code, the hot reload just doesn't work, which kind of makes sense. So over here we have an error. For some reason I did not see it before. Something must have happened. I don't know what, which is interesting. So we have some formatting issues, I guess. Okay. So what is going on here? Honestly, I have no idea. Unchanged, then what? How did this happen? Yeah. So I guess let's just cut out this. Does it work now? Okay, it's even formatted nicely, which I kind of like. So, okay, we just moved this bit of code somewhere completely out of place, and now we have moved it back in so that it looks nice. And yeah, so all right, this is how the code should look like. And of course, you can get this code from the link in the video description so that you don't have to go through this formatting and weird errors nightmare. But anyway, when we now run the app without any errors, it should build pretty quickly. And what should happen is that this code will actually be loaded into the running app. And we should actually see that when we try to edit the note, we should see this edited text inside of the form field. And we do, which is awesome. Become an in-demand Flutter developer. And this gibberish is also going to be here. And when we edit this gibberish to say something, hello there, you can see that this node will actually be edited on Firestore, or updated on Firestore, should I say. And now we can see its new value over here. All right, and actually that's it for this part because it's getting quite long. So we are going to implement the other fields in future parts of this tutorial series. So be sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already in order to not miss that new part, and also join the notification squad by hitting the bell button to make sure you grow your Flutter skills, because here on ResoCoder, I am determined to provide you with the best tutorials and resources so that you will become an in-demand Flutter developer. And if you are serious about becoming a great Flutter developer who can build real apps for clients or at a job, go to flutter.education, link is also in the video description by the way, to get the top curated Flutter news and resources aimed at improving your app development career. Over there you can also subscribe to my mailing list to get the best Flutter resources delivered weekly right into your inbox. If this video helped you, give it a like and also share it with other developers who are going to find it surely beneficial for them too. Leave a comment if you have anything to say, and see you in the next video.